Wabash Carnegie Public Library Oral History Program interviewing Kenneth Gray at the Wabash County Museum Wednesday, April 16th, 1975. Bill, the first thing I'm going to ask you is tell me when and where you were born and who your parents were.
Well, I was born here in Wabash, Indiana, north of town, where the Memorial Lawns Cemetery presently is located. And I was born January the 19th, 1910. And Dr. John Stewart had the honor, the pleasure, I don't know which. My mother was a Bowers from LaGros. My father, he came from out of Ohio. And my father came here and farmed, and he also dealt in training and use of sulky racehorses. And he had one of the fine racehorses, fortunately, and it was called Dolly Gray. And it held several records here years ago. He used to race it at the county fairs in and about Wabash County. And I lived there on the farm till about 4.5 years of age, and we came into town and moved on the corner of Market and Cass Street, right next to the Eagles Lodge. And also my father ran the old Big Four Railroad, which later became known as the Shepherd Hotel. And of course, years later, the Veterans of Foreign War bought that as their first home here. And of course, growing up here in the city itself, I had many, many experiences. And of course, gaining these experiences through becoming a newspaper boy for W.C. Notmeyer when I was between the ages of 7 and 8 years of age. Age had no control over working in those days. You had to help with the home life and so forth and support. And through this, I got to know many of the old-time business people, such as, Lewis Wolf, who used to be an insurance man here, and also Louis Peabody, the old-time jeweler, and Dr. Pratt, who was an optometrist here, and Dr. Graft, who was a dentist, and the Airgoods, Charles Airgood, the grocery man, and Hazen, the old druggist, and of course Charles Bradley, the old-time druggist here, and of course John Richards, and people of that caliber that had businesses here. James Watson, who had the old motoring garage here, and Mr. Rice, who had one of the first photography shops here, which used to be where the Indiana Hotel is presently. And of course, D.S. Miller, the old shoe man, Scott Walmer, another shoe man here, and of course Carl Schwab, who used to manage and run Renner's shoe store, new Otto Ebbinghaus, and of course the other shoe person, which was on Wabash Street, and any numerous people of that kind. And of course, one thing I always remember was the old Dye's grocery store. And they had a small drug store in there, and I used, when pass and deliver the paper there, I used to buy a penny's worth of their little red peppers. Candy, that was, of course. Always enjoyed it very much, and of course, too, the activities that gone around through those days. You sort of lived by your fists in those days, and I used to have fights to even hold my paper route individuals that want to take over the paper route. I mean, these little things happened all the time. We used to have what we called the East and the West gang. And I mean, they were gangs, not eliminating anything. We speak today of how rowdyism and fighting, we had them in those days too. And of course, I remember the old gymnasium, which W.C. Mills, whom was our first community service director here. And of course, Philip Magner, had to add him in there, that's senior, that is. And we used to have quite a go around. I used to be a little temperamental, I would say, hard to get along with, but we always managed to make out. I used to remember the old swimming pool in the gymnasium before the one was built on the south side by George Deal. And of course, too, I remember my days down in the old Wabash River. We used to go down there and swim. There was nothing unusual. The river was clean then, not like it is now. You can rest assured. We spent many hours down there. And we didn't have swimsuits in those days either. We just went swimming and fishing too, along with it. But I'd enjoyed those years. I'd like to live them over again if I had the opportunity, but time passes and you have to take care of what you can.
Bill, let me ask you, do you remember your grandparents either on your mother and father or father's side? Describe and tell me who they were and what they were.
Well, George, I remember my grandmother. She was Grandmother Bowers, and she lived in Lake Row, as I stated, and she used to grow turkeys. And that reminds me, when we first went to Lake Row, we used to have our buggy, and we went there, and then later on, of course, the Irvin came in. But I always loved to go to my grandmother. She made the grandest jellies and the hugest grapes on the arbor out and back. But one thing that always fascinated me was the turkeys. And of course, not knowing the characteristic, the nature of a turkey, I got in with a bunch of the turkeys, and I'm very sorry for it. But those are some of the experiences that you gain. And of course, unfortunately, my grandfather passed away before I was born. My grandmother lived to be 102 years old. And of course, my father, I'm going to say too, was nearly 92 years when he passed away. And my mother was in her 80s. So you see, I did have a little experience and had the opportunity of having my parents as well as my grandmother to help grow up with. And I've always enjoyed that.
Would you tell me about your father running the hotel? What kind of a trade did they have in those days, and what your remembrances of the hotel was?
Yeah, I was quite young then, George. I'm guessing a little of it because once in a while I would go down, he would take me down there. And of course, in those days, the Big Four ran their passenger trains through here, and the people would stop off there for overnight salesmen or people going through. And of course, they were in competition with the old Dixie Hotel that was on East Market Street there, and so forth. So, I mean, they had just a few rooms. I think, if I recall, I think there was about 8 rooms that could be used for people staying overnight. And of course, they had the breakfast there, which cost about 15 cents or 20 cents, according to how much toast or coffee you drank, I guess. But those are things that I remember, and they mean a lot to me as time goes by.
Okay, now tell me about going to school here. Where did you go to school in your high school?
Oh, now, George, now you're getting into the basics. I can see that. But really, I enjoyed my years too. I went to Miami school, and of course now, you know, everybody either rides a bicycle or mom or dad drives them to school or something of that nature. But we walked to and from no matter what the weather was, whether it was below zero or whether you had a hailstorm or whether it was a downpour. But I remember my early years at Miami. My first grade teacher was Miss Mary, and my second grade teacher was Miss Parrish. My third grade was Mrs. Galkenauer, and I vaguely remember Mrs. Risch, and of course Hattie Waite, who was in the Miami school on the teaching system here for a good many years, and she was the principal, and also she taught the 8th grade. And of course I remember a lot of the kids I went to school with, and of course I teased them. You know, in those days the girls had their pigtails and so forth like that. I wasn't no angel. And we used to tease the gals a lot, and we enjoyed it, but on the side I think they sort of liked it too because they got a little attention, but of course one never knows. And we used to have festivals there in the spring before school let out. We'd have maypoles and so forth like that, and I recall my maypole days too there. We got a little fouled up, should I say, on passing it around each other, and we got it all tore up, but of course everybody accused me of being the instigator, but I just couldn't see that I was the instigator of it. But nevertheless, I missed my recesses for the rest of the school term, which fortunately was a couple of weeks. And of course we had athletic contests there. Mr. Mills conducted those, and I was always anxious every spring to get out my tennis shoes and see if I could still run as fast as I used to. But we enjoyed those days very much, and of course our athletic participation out in the city park, they held just a regular track meet of all the schools, and I particularly remember one girl that really was quite an athlete in those days, and her name was Ronette Jordan, and she was a wonderful person. Her sister, I believe, is still living, Josephine. And but we always were excited, really, when Ronette ran the 100-yard dash. She ran the 220, and she even run and broad jump. And she held the championship in the grade schools for many years. And of course, eventually, you know, the girls got out of the track and field meet, but she was always very athletic, and I've often wondered how she finished in her athletic ability. But as I say, time passes and you lose sight of each other or so forth like that, and you often wonder if you just, well, when you're reminiscing, I mean, I'm getting old, and I reminisce once in a while, and all of a sudden I get called to and wake up from where I was thinking of.
How about you went on to high school? Where was it, and what happened? And
Oh yes, I had quite enjoyable high school time.
We're talking about high school.
Yeah. Well, of course, I went to the old high school, which I went there for 2 years. Well, of course, in the meantime, we had our various studies, and I had Janet Jones and Ruth Jones, and of course, I had Rex Sims, who was really a great man. I always admired him for his work with the children, small as well as in the high school, and the great effort that he put out to keep a few of us individuals in line. We always managed, I don't know why, after shop period was over, I'd have to clean the place up. It took me a long time to find out why I was one of the selectees in this job. But principal there was a very great individual, and he looked out for all the students there. He was interested in them, and well, he was just great. And right now, at this moment, his name slips my mind, but he was always sure that the boys and the girls towed the mark and so forth like that. Oh, yeah, his name, I recall to me here, was Mr. Darnell. And he was really great. I mean, there wasn't anything that he wouldn't do for the student. He would go out of his way to help and so forth like that. And with those kind of individuals, well, you just can't help but get over your line or whatever you undertake. But my first day of going into high school, I remember very distinctly, was what we called the paddle day. All the sophomore, juniors, and seniors would line up from Miami Street here down to Cass Street in two lines, and they all had a paddle. And, of course, you had to run down through this initiation line. Well, if you survived, by the time you got to the other end, you've had it. But after, well, in 1926, after the new high school had been constructed, we moved to the new high school. And, of course, at this time, we had one of the finest coaches, I believe, that's ever been in the high school history, and that was Coach William Tom. And he was quite a football man, he was quite a track man, and of course, above all, he was an outstanding wrestler. And one time, why, he held the championship in the welterweight. But he took a few of us in tow and so forth, and we worked, and he'd always shake his head. Well, excuse me, he says, I don't know what I've got here, but I'm sure going to do something with it. So, finally, why, our first year we weren't too successful because we were all learning wrestling and so forth. But then along came the team that we set, and we made the state wrestling championship of Indiana. The first time the high school has ever had an official state team, and it was a wrestling team. And we followed it up the next year. We gained the state championship.
Who was on that team?
Well, as I recall, there was Bob Stoops, Maxwell Gray, well, myself, and then George Ross, and Stauffer, and Ostheimer, Hogan. It's about all I remember off of our first team. The second year, why, it was practically the same, and we had Bob Schuler, and myself, and Max Gray, Ross, and Bob Stoops, Jellybean Jones, and there was one other that escapes me right at the present.
Oh, we can fill that in. Yeah, we can fill
Yeah.
that in. Okay. Did you participate in football or anything also?
Oh, yeah, I participated in football. Matter of fact, I think I was what you classify the dummy for the tacklers. And, of course, we played, I got a chance a couple of years. And, of course, I warmed the bench and run the water bucket, too. But still in all, I was wearing a uniform, and I earned my W's out to the high school and was a member of the W Club. And so I felt that I felt pretty good considering the athletes, the outstanding athletes that we've had out of there. And they've been tremendous. I mean, there's untold number of them. There's like, say, Larry Marks. He was, at one time back in the 20s, was one of the outstanding athletes of the country. And there was Tiny Knee and people like that, I mean, they were just tremendous. I mean, just outstanding. Fred Morrow and his high jumping and pole vaulting, and Jumbo Frazier in the dashes. I mean, we were loaded with outstanding athletes.
Did you finish your high school career, and then what happened, Bill?
Oh, well, when I finished my high school in 1928, I had the opportunity for a scholarship down at Indiana University, and of course, Coach Tom was helping. Well, matter of fact, he helped several of the boys that have gone through and down through there, like Orville Scott and Jelly Bean. He helped him get scholarship, and Bernard Bowlby, and several of the people that was out there, and Ross, above all, because Ross was one of the outstanding Indiana athletes, as we all well know. But I was a little hesitant about it. I had what you call itchy feet, I guess. I don't know. But I turned it down, and of course, I guess maybe I read too many Navy posters, but the opportunities that the Navy offered, and of course, I face it, I had to fight a way through because I didn't have money or anything, so I decided to take the Navy. Well, truthfully, I'm very happy that I did. I mean, the experience that I gained from it, and the countries and the places I've been, I feel that, and the people I met, and the jobs I had while I was in the service, and the staff work, and I just feel that it was a education equivalent to a college. I mean, it wasn't pointed to a certain phase, but overall, if I had the opportunity to do it again, I wouldn't be hesitant about it at all.
Tell me how, as a young man, 16, 17, 18 years old, how you went about joining the Navy, and where you went, and your first introduction to Navy life, and so forth.
Well,
this is the interesting part of it.
Yeah. Well, George, I left here. Of course.
What year was this?
This was in December of 1929, and I spent my first Christmas really away from home in the Navy, and of course it affected me a little bit. I mean, I missed being home with my friends that I knew and were associated with, and of course we started off, we had to go to Indianapolis. Mm-hmm. And of course, now you must realize in those days they were only allowed to take so many men in the service, and I forget exactly how many it was a month, but I was fortunate enough, being that I had just gotten out of school and was capable, I guess, of passing their what we call the auroric test, and was selected. So I didn't even get a chance to call home, tell them goodbye, hello, or what. And they gave me my papers and loaded me on a train, and away I went to Chicago, Illinois, at Great Lakes. And of course, upon arrival there, well, they take you, they have a barracks there that they have all the new men enlisting, and so the next day, why, we got our physicals and everything, and that was surprising to me. I went through the barber's line, and they put me in the barber's chair, and boy, I mean, they really skinned the hair off. And I always wore my hair short in what we used to call a crew cut, and but I couldn't see the percentage of cutting about a half-inch of hair off and leave me look like a bald eagle. But nevertheless, that was part of it. And of course, going through the line, I got a couple of shots where, well, I can't say right now, but and really got through the physical line, and of course, as we went through the physical and so forth like that, where they issued us our clothing and so forth like that, and the next day, why, some big old tough rough boatswain come through the barracks screaming, get up, get up, you're late, get up. Well, it was still dark outside, so anyhow, we all got out, and of course, we didn't have the facilities that they have nowadays. We wore, showered, and everything outside. Mm-hmm. Now, might be unbelievable, but it's the truth. And you did this in the wintertime. You run from your barracks through one door, through the showers, back in. And I'm telling you, it was something. Mm-hmm. And, of course, a little later on then, why, we got another test for establishing our abilities and what we would be best suited for. And then we started our 3 months of drill. And, of course, we drilled every day, whether it was raining, snowing, or what, on the grinder, as we called it. And then we were, upon graduation, why, we were all given our orders. Well, of course, I was, at that time, I was interested in aviation, and fortunately, I made aviation school, and it was right there on Great Lakes, and, of course, from there, you went to flight training. Well, of course, we went to school there for about a year, and when you finished your flight training, why, or your school, why, then, if you could pass your physical, why, you'd go to flight school in Florida. Well, about 4 or 5 weeks before I finished my year of schooling there in aviation mechanics and so forth, why, they canceled flight training for the enlisted man. Well, that about tore me up. I had worked so much and so hard on it that I felt dedicated. That's what I wanted. Well, of course, as I said, you can't cry over spilt milk. So from there, why, I just thought of something. You know, when we finished our training, why, of course, we had assignments each day, working parties and so forth. Well, I never forget this chief boatswain. His name was Chief Cheatham. Well, I always figured he cheated me. I don't know, but he wanted to volunteer, wanted to know if anybody had ever handled a wheelbarrow or anything like that. And, of course, old Jokey here, why, I stepped up and said, sure, I can handle a wheelbarrow and a shovel or broom. I'm a little farm boy. And he says, well, that's fine. Well, we got 3 more of us. Well, at that time, Admiral Crosley was there, and he was one of the old-time admirals, that reminds me. And the old-time admirals used to wear a goatee as well as a mustache, and on the chin, under that goatee, was an anchor that was tattooed on there. And it was one of the markings of the old-time admirals from the old school. Well, anyhow, he was very much of a horseman. And, of course, every morning, why, he and his friends and so forth, they had a bridle path, and they'd go through this every day. Well, this wheelbarrow decision job came, so we went. Well, our job was cleaning up this bridle path. And you know, to this day, that always reminds me never to volunteer. And boy, and from then on, I never volunteered for anything in the Navy.
What money did you make to begin? And what were the sleeping quarters like? And what eating? What did you eat? In training.
In training, well, we drew $18 a month. And if I was a seaman first class, I drew $21. And, of course, I was an entered apprentice, so I drew the $18. And then, of course, when you went to seaman second class while you drew the 36. And, well, it took a long time to get there, really, and it was a lot of hard work. But while I was at the lakes, and even after I left the lakes, I was drawing my $18 a month. And, of course, we didn't have all these fancy wash basins and locker storages and things like they have now on bases or on ships. We had what they called jack stays. It was a pipe that was strung along the barracks floor, and you had what you called a sea bag. And your clothes were rolled, and you used tie-ties, little white tie-ties on each end of your, like you roll your trousers up, you put two tie-ties on it, one on each end, and this tie-tie was tied in a square knot and tucked so many times. Well, and then our clothes were neatly folded and really scrupulously scrubbed clean. I mean, of course, we didn't have irons and everything to press the creases. Everything was water creased. And we hung them out on the line, and when they dried, why, we rolled them and stowed them neatly in our sea bags. Then we tied this sea bag to the jackstay with two round turns and a square knot, and took the ends, or the beckets, you'd call them, and stuck them down in the top of the sea bag. And, of course, your sea bag was white canvas, and you were issued two of them, and you had to keep one scrubbed. Every week you scrubbed one of them, so that you'd always have a clean sea bag. And then, of course, we had what we call sea hammocks. And it was a flat piece of canvas, about 3 foot wide and about 8 foot long. It had 8 grommets in each end. And then from that, you had your webbings with a line from each one of the webbings that you tied between the jackstays. So that at night, you opened your hammock up, went over to the hammock locker, took out your hammock, put it up, and stretched it, and got in it and slept. And
did you have to sleep on your back?
Well, if you wanted to land properly, you'd better sleep on your back. But after a while you got used to the hammock, and they are very comfortable. And of course, the beauty of it was when we were at sea, if the ship would roll, why, you just rolled just as level and nice, and it was really great. You sort of helped put you to sleep, really. Mm-hmm. But then when you got up in the morning, you rolled your hammock up, and you threw half hitches around it, and then brought the becket ends up, lashed them together, and stowed them in the hammock netting. Mm-hmm. And of course, really the what we would call chow, what you might call breakfast, dinner, or supper, dinner, lunch, well, we were fed very well. I mean, in the mornings, why, of course, out of our company, we had to furnish so many mess cooks because our men were being fed in the mess hall, and but we would have every day they had a certain thing. I mean, if you'd go in on a Wednesday, you'd know what they were going to have. And of course, feeding so many people in that fashion, why, you just couldn't have a different variety, in other words. But the food was well cooked, and there was plenty of it. Whatever you took, you were expected to eat, not to be wasteful about it. And the mess halls were very clean. You had wooden tables. They were white, wood, oak, and they were scrubbed and sanded every week and clean. And well, it would just be difficult to even beat that food today, I would say.
How did they maintain discipline in the training facility?
Well, now, we had what we call a chief master at arms. And of course, there were so many master at arms assigned to a barracks. And of course, every company had its company captain and sergeant, and platoon leader and squad leaders. Well, these individuals were selected for their ability as well as their handling of people or personnel. And they were assigned various duties. Now, like one would be assigned to see that every man was up when reveille went, and that he had gone to the washroom, and that his hammocks were properly stowed, and the sea bags were hung properly, and that the men were in the proper uniform when they fell out in front of the barracks for quarters, and shoes were shined, and neck scarves were tied properly with a proper type square knot, and all buttons buttoned up, and things of that nature, and that if an individual needed a haircut, he was informed so, and he could go over to the barber shop, they'd cut his hair free. So, I mean, you had different individuals, and then, of course, we had the master-at-arms of the regular service. They were petty officers, maybe second or first class, and they were doing shore duty there. Well, they would have charge of the cleaning detail. In other words, when all hands were out to fall in for muster and then for drill or whatever was going on for the day's routine, they would take charge of the cleaning detail. They would empty all the ashtrays and mop the heads in washrooms and shine the bright work, polish the floors, sweep and clean of that nature. I mean, it was well organized, and that was teaching the individual responsibility and what it was required of him. And basically, this was for his training prior to his going aboard ship or to another station. Now, another thing that they had there, another thing I was fortunate to get in on, was seamanship school. Now, they had a rig, a three-mast schooner down at the waterfront there at the Great Lakes, and they had a seaman's school. And this seaman's school lasted 3 months. And you went through all types of seamanship work and everything like that. And I feel that possibly one reason that I was able to get this opportunity was the fact that since I couldn't go to flight school, I was going to become an aviation boatswain, which they had at that time. And so they sent me down there, and I went through that whole 3 months, climbing the rigging and knowing how to furl sails and so forth like that. And I was very happy to be able to furl sails and rig sail because it came in very handy for me later on in my naval career when I was on the USS Swan, and we were on the Amelia Earhart search when she went down. And of course, I was on a seaplane tender at that time, and of course you can only carry so much fuel, so much water, etc. So we were running short of water. So fortunately I had this experience, and we had booms on there. I rigged the canvas for it, and also the awnings and things like that to catch water and to help us conserve fuel by using the winds. Now, today that would sound impossible, but really we had a great number of experiences that way. But
what was your first assignment then after you finished Great Lakes? What happened and where did you go?
Oh, I got assigned to the USS Saratoga.
Your duties and what it was and so forth.
Well, when I was on the Saratoga, of course, I was assigned to the aviation department on there on the flight deck, and which was really a great experience. And my skipper was Captain King at that time, but later on became the admiral of the fleet, Admiral King. And of course, we had the early aircraft then, and like the fabric-covered fighters and so forth. And we had on there too the only Chiefs squadron. Of course, it was commanded by a commander aviation, and but it was just amazing to see these enlisted men, chiefs, fly these little fighter planes. And I always remembered it was the VS-13. I got a tattoo on my leg for, that was the outfit that I was assigned to while on board there. And, but they had carrier launchings and training, and we would get the aircraft squadrons off from San Diego. We operate in that area. And of course, too, I had the privilege, too, of the USS Macon, the airship. They were experimenting at that time with the Macon. She carried these little fighter planes that they were dropped down from inside the airship on a rod, and they would launch them from there, and then they would also recover them in this fashion. And they wanted to see how airship and the large carrier like the Saratoga and the Lexington would operate, and whether or not the airship was capable of making a landing on the carrier. Well, this came about, and of course that was a great thing to watch too, where they dropped their ship lines to the men on the carrier, the handling lines, I should say, and as the Macon come down, she was dropping ballast and so forth like that, and then eventually they got her down to where she was maybe 200 feet above the ship's deck because of our structure, and it proved very satisfactory. And then, unfortunately, a day or two later, we lost her. But the experiment proved very satisfactory in that relationship. And I worked on, as I say, I was assigned to the flight deck, and I started out of chocking and moving planes around on the deck. And then a little later on, I got to handling the planes, moving them on the decks and so forth like that. And then eventually I left there. The Saratoga was going back to the East Coast, and I wasn't too crazy about the East Coast. I wanted to stay on the West Coast, so they transferred me to the USS Lexington. And so I picked up my duties over there, and then finally I ended up being one of the launching personnel for aircraft. And of course on the Lexington I gained a lot of experience through picking up aircraft like the seaplanes and so forth, coming alongside, and we'd hang the boom over and pick them up and lower them into the water too for takeoffs.
Now, were they launching and recovering aircraft at that time?
Oh yes. They, of course, the system that they had at that time was sort of a barrier about just about near what we would call the island of the carrier, which was just about halfway, really, the length of the ship. And of course, they had a landing surface officer, which was on the fan, what we call the stern or the fantail of the carrier, and he was located on the right-hand side, and he had little paddles in his hand like a ping pong, but a little larger, and they were colored. And of course, at night they had little lights on them, a red and a green, just like navigational lights. And they would bring the aircraft in. The aircraft would approach from dead astern, and he would come in at a certain elevation. Then as he approached, if he was flying too high, the landing officer would lower his arms outward and down. And if he was too low, he would vice versa. He'd raise his arms up. And then just before the plane came in on its proper landing, he would tell the pilot to cut. Well, the landing officer would take his right hand and bring it across his throat and move his arm across, and that would denote to the pilot to cut his motor or engine. And then as he landed, he would start applying his brake. And of course, they had a tail skag, a long hook that extended out about 3 foot. And as the plane went up the flight deck, this hook could bounce along and catch wires that were stretched. And of course, these wires were run on steam So when a hook would grab one of these, why, it would slow him down. But if the pilot was coming in and a sudden gust of wind would come across the flight deck and his hook failed to grab one of these flight deck wires, well, we had what we call a wire fence up. Well, this fence, if it was hit by the propeller or anything, the wires were attached so that they would break automatically and just roll up and wrap right around the plane and stop him altogether, just roll him up just like in a cocoon. And then, of course, later on, why, with the experimentation and so forth like that, they came up with the air type, which was more efficient and at the same time used for launching purposes. Of course, this is later on. I mean, that would come up during World War II, the more. But everything in those days really were in the experimental, as well as our radar. Gosh, we had a radar that looked like a big toaster up on top of the carrier. First experimenting, it was good for 100 miles. And, well, it was a good 20 by 30 foot square. And it was just amazing. I mean, how far radar search and everything has come in the last 20 or 30 years.
Did you get an opportunity to fly?
Oh yes. Certain individuals, like I say, that had flight deck operations and so forth, we were paid flight pay. And, of course, if we had a group on there that come out from San Diego or someplace in that neighborhood for flight training landings, why, we would get part of our flight time there, or otherwise we would get it with the seaplanes that we carried on board, or a plane of that nature. See, we always carried, for emergency, we always carried a patrol plane, which we call a PBY. In the old days, that was the big hull and two large motors, and then we regular seaplane.
Did on this aircraft carrier, was that good, what was known as good duty? Were you still sleeping in hammocks, and how was the food?
Oh yeah, we were still sleeping in hammocks and had the old same procedures for our messing and so forth. And of course, fortunately there, why, we still had the jackstay and the hammock nettings. And of course, about the time I was getting ready to leave, why, they were starting to install small 2x2 lockers for your toilet articles and things like that. So that's one thing that I missed on the carrier at the time. But it was a tremendous experience. And really, it was the old-time flying. It was in the experimental stage. And the old-time aviation officers are so much different than the ones that later came along later, because they were taking a lot of chances, they experimented a lot, and they never said anything about it. And we did lose a lot of officers, as well as a radio operator. You know, they carried a radio operator with them, and he was also the machine gunner. And they would go out and they would train. I mean, it didn't make any difference whether they were an flyer or anything. Why, they had their responsibilities and their training cycle, just the same as the gunnery people did on the ship, on the 20 millimeter guns and the 5-inch and the 8-inch guns. Mm-hmm. It was training, but this aviation, it was really something to observe as well as to be a part of, you know. And I never forget those days. And the way a lot of them really, as I might say, gave their lives for what we really have today.
Did anyone ever think at that time that this was going to be the coming way of warfare, with World War II was still 10, 12 years away? Did they feel that Navy aviation was going to develop in that direction at that time?
Well,
Or was the battleship still a big thing?
Well, really, the battleship was our first line of defense. We can't get away from that at that time. And then there was a follow-up with the cruisers, then your destroyers, and of course your submarines. They were in their infancy, and the submarines could only do so much. and they could only go so deep. They could only carry a certain type of armament. Our destroyers, only thing they could do was drop depth charges, and their search and hunt equipment wasn't, it was still in the experimental stage. And of course our battleships and our cruisers had the heavy armament on it, and they were the forerunners. They were the ones that carried the 16 and 12 and 8 and 5 and 3-inch guns. And of course the war concept at that time was strike first, the hardest, and then move. And basically everything was built around that. And then of course as aviation was being experimented with and coming into its own, and it was coming in really fast, because you could tell by the type of training that the squadrons were receiving. Just like on the Lexington I was on, we had a squadron commander on what we call the VS squadron. He was a dive bombing outfit. And he never flew his squadron off of that flight deck unless he had a full squadron. And he was a terrific individual. He was a driver, and it was just wonderful to watch him dive from 15 and 20,000 feet, and his whole squadron. They never went in on an angle. They nosed over and came down. His name was Arthur Gavin. He was a commander, and he was one of our early experimental pilots at that time, working in this type of military tactics. And of course our fighters, they would make these approaches and attacks even on our carrier, of course simulated, of course, but I mean it was just, you could see it changing year after year, because see, when we'd hold these fleet maneuvers, we had what we called an East Coast fleet, a West Coast fleet. And of course the East Coast fleet during the summer maneuvers would go to the west, and then the West Coast would go east. But then and when we'd pass each other, we'd hold war maneuvers. I mean, heck, we'd have darkened ship, everything like that at night, and actually run war problems and things like that. And then when the time was to return to our own base or location, why, we would hold the same maneuvers again. And this would last for a period of 3 months. And you never got ashore or anything like that. You drilled every day, 24 hours a day. You got rest, sure. But I mean, you were on call, and you would sleep at your gun station and stuff like that. And it was a tremendous training cycle. And this 3 months was spent training. I mean, really training their ships and everything like that, and they would use full speed and everything like that. Then the other 9 months was still, you would be in your port or in the harbor. You did maneuver because of the costs, the fleet handling and so forth, and we would hold our gunnery drills every day, fire drills, general quarters, and cover all your types of drills. Damage control, man overboard, all of these. So when you went to sea, then you were in a competitive spirit against these other ships because they were doing the same thing. And then every ship was fighting for the battle efficiency E. You had to meet so many requirements of all types of training. And if you got an E on your ship, boy, you were really recognized, and every individual on that ship got to put a little E on his arm. Now, the engineers had a red E, and the deck force, the quartermaster, and the rest of them had a white E. And then if you won it more than one time, you had a little bar put underneath it. I mean, it was competitive, and everybody was really working towards those goals.
Did your ship ever win it?
Oh, yes. We won it twice.
Now, when you went did your ship, the Saratoga, the Lexington, did you go to the East Coast during these training periods?
Oh, yes.
And how did you, what route did you take, around the Horn or through the canal?
Well, we went through the canal. I'll tell you why. It was short timing, And at the same time, they wanted to find out if our carriers at that time could go through the canal. There was the first experiment with the canals. And they were really, I'm not exaggerating a bit, but there wasn't a foot's clearance on each side amidships of our carriers.
How long did it take you to get through the canal?
It took us just about a whole day, a little over. It's according, to what ships. See, you couldn't block everything off. You had to let other ships come through. See, I mean, that's the law of the seas. And but another thing that was amazing was to see those little old steam jennies or even mules pulling the ships through.
Carriers also?
Yeah.
When you went through the canal, you cut off all power, is that right?
Oh no, you keep everything on emergency. In other words, if you needed power, you could have it. You didn't kill your engines or anything like. You always maintained power.
What were these early aircraft carriers? How were they powered? What kind of a generating facility did they have? Oil, coal, combination?
Oil.
All oil.
Oil.
Yeah.
Oil and steam, inline and inline boilers, everything.
Now, did this make the ship dirty or not?
No, but for the simple reason is your upkeep and maintenance was very, very efficient. I mean, well, you couldn't afford to because of the type of ship you were in. Yeah. Now, like some of the old coal burners and so forth, well, that's different too.
You got on those later?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. We pretty well exhausted naval aviation, the story of the carriers and so forth.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to your next assignment and what happened.
Oh, well.
What year are we in and what
happened? We're in the early 30s. I left there and went to, I left there and went to the Asiatics out of China, and I went over on the old Shawmont. She was a troop transport guy. She'd been used for years on the China run. And, of course, on there, I can't say too much for facilities. I mean, it was so crowded and everything. And the chow, they fed on there 24 hours a day. They just carried that many people back and forth, and they carried only the military. Mm-hmm. And that was a place that I learned to use a hair tonic for soap. Mm-hmm. They, of course, soap was very difficult to come by.
This was on the transport to
China.
Yeah,
and that most of the time, you could get salt water anytime you wanted it, and they had just certain hours, like for your scuttlebutts where you got your drinking water, or for washing clothes, which maybe you got a chance to wash your clothes once going over, so that's why you had to have what we call a lucky bag to be sure you had some extra clothes. But this hair tonic that they had on there was, I don't know, they must have had soap or something, but you could mix it with this salt water and get like a soap effect on you. And of course you smelt like 4 roses or something, I don't know, but
how long did this trip take to China?
It took me 28 days.
From San Diego?
No, out of Frisco.
San Francisco?
Yeah.
And where did you land in China?
Well, I landed close to Shifu, and I went there to the USS Blackhawk. She was a repair ship for the China fleet. And, of course, I stayed on her just about 18 months and then came back, got transferred back.
Yeah.
And one of the things was that that was the only place that they ever cleaned the ship's sides in dress whites. Mm-hmm. And Captain Reeves, he had the ship at the time, and he was a disciplinarian if I ever saw him. He's the biggest disciplinarian I've ever encountered in the service. Mm-hmm. And I had the pleasure, though, really, of meeting them again when, after Pearl Harbor attack, to go to Washington, and then this is at Bremerton, Washington, where we got worked over for winter weather up at Alaska, and he was one of our passengers, and I got to talk with him and so forth.
Now, when you were the 18 months in China on a repair ship, repairing what? Doing
well,
what?
In other words, that was making engineering repairs and so forth like that to destroyers or the cargo ships and stuff like that. And, well, just like the Shaman that went over, and she pulled in alongside of her, you see, and she get any necessary engine work and so forth like that. She did ship repairs for breakdowns and things like that. And then, of course, they had the ships spent upkeep periods, alongside.
Right. Now, would you go out to service the ships, or would they come into you?
Oh no, they came into us. Yeah. The only time that we moved actually was in case of a storm or something like that, that might possibly cause damage to the ship or the dock that we tied up. Hell, we only go right out in the harbor and tie up to one of these big buoys and hang and ride and bounce, that's all. And then when it was over, come back.
Now, this was during the era of gunboat diplomacy in China.
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever get a chance to ride the destroyers or the gunboats or anything?
Well, we took little trips on the what they call the Golden Star. It was a vacation boat and so forth, and they would go up the river so far. You see, we were restricted as to going up into the rivers on account of the gunboats, etc., because of the conditions and the problems. And of course, this trip, it'd run, maybe 7, 8 days, according to any problems that the ship might have.
3, Kenneth Gray. Bill, we were talking about the China service, and we were talking, in this China service, we were talking primarily about the duty and so forth, and you making trips up was that the Yangtze?
Yeah.
What was it like in pre-war China? Was there a move from Japan at that time, or what was going on at that part of the world as far as the Navy was concerned, and your observation?
Well, of course, there was a little uneasiness, I mean, you always hear this, the French and the British and all of them. There was a little uneasiness there, and of course, Kai-shek and all of, and Manchuria, that,
The whole area.
The whole area, see, they were ifs and ands, you might say, and it was, I don't know, you could just sort of feel it. I mean, of course, as we know later on, it developed, and that's really the starting of our problem with World War II. But there was always that little uneasiness. Some places, why, it was fine. Other places, ignore it. And that's why most of your traveling around there was done with the Golden Star. Take the families and so forth around and everything like that. And when you put in along the road, you'd anchor and you do this, and they'd always send a party along, and you could only go certain areas and so forth like that. And of course, the people there, the Chinese, were really great, though. I mean, for instance, I could have all my whites or blues or anything like that cleaned and washed and scrubbed and everything like that for a whole month for $2. And they wouldn't mark on your bundle or your name or anything. And how in the devil they ever could remember who it belonged to this day, I could never figure it out. But you would always get your stuff back. And if you go ashore there and go sightseeing or something like that, of course, you always had these guys that was always looking for the nickel and so forth like that. But all in all, if you treated them nice, there wasn't a thing in the world they really wouldn't do for you. And they would help you and so forth like that. And like a lot of us, we bought cloth and stuff like that. Well, some of these ones that come to the ship all the time, barters and sellers and so forth, if you treated them friendly and maybe give them an extra $1 or something like that, well, if you were going to buy anything, boy, they would send you to the right place and everything, and they would meet you and go along with you to see that you weren't gouged.
Yeah.
And there was still that feeling. I mean, there was that barrier. I mean, you couldn't get away from it, and that's why going over there, you know, it made it very difficult for a lot of the sailors, you know, because most of them that went over were single. There were very, very few married ones. They were all single, and up until I think it was in 1924, any man that served in China, he was credited 2 years for one. And that was why, you see, we had so many military, Army, Marines, and Navy retiring with 16 years. We had a tremendous number of those. And but of course they eliminated that and gone back to the minimum was 20 years.
Was China considered good duty or not, considering the conditions and the discipline and the disciplinarians that
Well, I would be a little hesitant to say that it was the best duty, but it was an experience. The actions of the people and learning about the people, their habits, and the geographical setup that they had, and the way the people lived. I mean, it was really, in that aspect, it was really something worthwhile to know. And that's why now, you know, if people have been in places like that, or, well, any place in Europe to speak of, why they realize what the people are facing even today.
Yeah.
And so many of our people here in this country just can't realize how those people are living. And the environmental and, I mean, there's just no way of explaining it unless you see it. And like I say, it's always what you see, you remember.
Yeah, sure. Well, you're still a young man. When the China duty ends.
Yeah.
And is your enlistment up yet?
No, I have just about 2 more years to go.
On a 6-year enlistment, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so when my tour was up, why, you had the privilege, I mean, of remaining or coming home or getting new assignments. So I asked for Hawaii. Well,
What year?
this was along about 1930, around 30, about 35, 36, someplace along in the early 30s there.
You asked for Hawaii duty
Yeah.
station. Okay.
So I got my orders, and golly, I noticed they had me assigned to Samoa, to the USS Ontario. Of course, now there's an old coal burner. That was one of the last coal burners that we had in the Navy. And of course, as they say, I was in engineering, and so I got assigned there for temporary duty, then further transfer to the USS Swan.
Still at Samoa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this was a temporary drop-off for me. So I hadn't been there. I think I arrived in the middle of the week, and on Friday they coaled ship. Well, now the ships they had bunkers, what we call coal bunkers. And they weren't these big high where you could walk, through an ordinary door. You had to stoop over. And so I got stuck way up into the bunker where you couldn't stand. You was over like this on that, and they passed these canvas bags with the coal in it up like this. And I spent 3 days doing that, and I couldn't straighten up for 2 weeks, and so sore and stiff. And of course, now there was another thing that why a lot of the boys got out of engineering awful quick. But as I say, these things dawned on me after I experienced it. And of course, they had these white decks, what they call teak wood. And that's what most of your Navy ships in those days had, was teak wood, because you could clean it and make it white looking. And so then we spent the next, I think it was just about a week, scrubbing the deck. In other words, you use sand and cinder dust. And then you had what we call a holy stone, which was a brick with a little round hole gouged out of the center. Then you had a little stick, looked like a broomstick handle. And the damn boatswain mate, he wouldn't give you one where you could stand up like this. It was short, so you had to bend over, and you grabbed it like this and over like this, so that you would lock it in your arms, and you worked it back and forth, and you took one strip of teak wood as you went along. Of course, there was 3 or 4 of you, maybe 6, but you sort of staggered behind each other, and then a boatswain mate would come along and wash it off, and then he'd throw some more of this sand and cinder down. But that was the way you cleaned your decking on your ship. And so I stayed on. I think I was on there about a month and a half, but the food was great. You had that food from we had that food there from the tropics and everything, and then they had luau's and everything there for us. I mean, the ship was stationed there sort of. You see, we used to have a governor there, and that was primarily why you were there, as a escort or security and so forth, whatever you want to call it. And we used to have luau's once a week, and the natives, they came aboard and talked and so forth like that with us. I mean, they were very, very friendly. And after the time there, I found out the guy that I relieved was on vacation up in Hawaii, and he was just coming back, so they were short, and and I was a fill-in. But anyhow, it was most enjoyable, and of course the guy, he was happy because he was late getting back. Well, he couldn't get back sooner. So I went on from there on up to Hawaii, and was assigned to the USS Swan. She was a seaplane tender, and of course we were attached there at Ford Island, and we operated with the PBY, or flying boats there, and of course they held operations around the smaller islands there, the main island, and over to Midway. Midway was their main operational base when they helped these problems of maneuvers and stuff like that. And of course, there was quite a lot of activity there. The aviation there was very strict. They worked very close with the Army there and things like that, and submarines, and on their operations outside of Pearl and so forth like that. And of course, I was on the Avocet when, as I said a little earlier there, on the Amelia Earhart search and so.
Tell me about that Amelia Earhart search.
Well, we were delegated as a station watch. See, we operated in that area, the Midway Island, Howland, and all that. And of course, we were assigned to Howland Island area, halfway between Pearl Harbor and Howland. Of course, so prior to her supposing to land there, that's where she was supposed to land. Well, we carried the oil and gasoline and supplies to Howland. And of course, we had the funny thing of it is, when they assigned us, they said, oh, they're just take and deliver this stuff at the top of this island and so forth, and then you take up on your station where you're to be lookout and so forth and communication. So we got all loaded the fantail up with oil drums clear up to our ears, and of course we carried a 10,000-gallon gasoline tank, aviation gas, because we fueled these seaplanes when we operated with them. Well, when we got to Howland Island, why, there was no way of getting it up to the top. I mean, it wasn't a straight up or anything like that, but it was sort of angled, but there was no path or anything. So we got thinking about it, so finally we come up with the par buckling. And we had to par buckle all those barrels and everything up.
What's that mean, power buckle?
Well, par buckle is where you put down two ropes or wire, and you run them back, and you lay your barrel or so forth in between these, and then you pull on them and roll it up. Well, of course, we climb up the top, and then what we used was these wire cables, and then we used regular falls, what we call two blocks, with ropes running between, and haul them up. Call them block and tackle. In the Navy, we call them falls, because whenever you used anything to lower or raise, like a boat or anything, we call it par buckle. And so we worked those all up there, and then we got back on the ship, and of course then we went to our station. And of course she was leaving down Aussie and coming this way, and we had communications with her, I guess probably up to a day before she was actually lost. And of course the weather was bad too. The weather kicked up and so forth like that, and we got a little communications from her. She was sending out communication, but then all of a sudden it was gone. So finally, the Lexington, she was down there after they found she was gone for a search. Well, we operated with the Lexington, and there was another small ship, but it was a destroyer. See, these carriers, they always carried an escort, one or two destroyers, and a sub warfare, stuff like that, for protection. But so finally, after 3 days search, of course, she launched her aircraft, and she covered an awful lot of miles. Mm-hmm. And so we were ordered to go on down into the Gilbert group and so forth like that, down in the Gilbert Islands and through that area there. And of course, I was the boatswain mate on the ship, so I got the coxswain the boat, and of course the skipper went ashore there, and we took 6 men, and the exec, he was captain of the ship then, relieving the captain while he went ashore. Of course, you see down there in those islands and so forth, they speak different languages. I mean, there can be 2 or 3 languages on one island. So, of course, when you're operating in these various outplaces, you have the books, the languages that speak. So we went ashore. And this one old chief there, he... When the captain asked him about it, he says he saw a bird fly over. Well, now, that was about the middle of the Gilbert Island group. So, from Gilbert through that area, the Japs were pretty well set in. And so we searched for about 10 days. And, of course, our food was getting low, and water, like I said a while ago, that's where rigging the awnings and the sail and so forth helped us out a lot. And, boy, I never tasted beans in so many different fashions for meals as I did on that. But altogether, we spent about 28 days out. And And we came back into Pearl Harbor going about 4 or 5 knots, just enough to turn the screw over. But it was quite an experience. And of course, later on, Putman, whom was her husband, sent us all a thank you, you know, for the search and how much he appreciated it and so forth like that. And of course, the Navy congratulated us, you know, on the fine work, which is normal procedures and so forth. But, and then of course later on, why, I got transferred to the Northampton. I had the aviation group in there.
That's at Pearl Harbor still.
Yeah.
In Hawaii.
And we were known as Cruiser Division 4. And that was the first time I ever became a artist in stage play. They had a program on there that the ships give, you see. Mm-hmm. And I got to play a part in that, and it was called Pearl Harbor Days, you know, and they had a Hawaiian music and all this. And they called it really the Haudette Follies. And I was trying to think of this chaplain that was out of Pearl Harbor when he said, pass the ammunition, you know. Mm-hmm. Well, he had charge. He was the senior chaplain there. And we had quite a play on, we had Hilo Hattie on there, on the ship. This was on the Northampton, and we had quite a show on there.
What kind of duty was the Northampton?
Well, that was cruiser duty.
That was a cruiser?
Yeah. She was a heavy cruiser, and she operated around through the area there, and of course she, when I got aboard, we made a trip down to Australia. We visited Australia there. That was when a little of the China setup was coming up ahead, and we were out just, you know, operating, but see too. Yeah. But then, while I was on the Northampton, I took the examination for a warrant. And so, fortunately, I made warrant, and then I was transferred back to the Avocet. And I was on her, and then it's on her till, well, let's see, there was Pearl Harbor, and then I went up on the Alaskan invasion and so forth.
Now on the, tell me about Pearl Harbor. Just tell me what happened. You're on duty that day?
Well, of course, like I say, you hear so many different stories about it and the happenings. Of course, I mean, everybody was in a different position or place, and it gives a different view of it. But I was still with the aviation there at Ford Island, and I was tied up at Ford Island. And of course, this was, as I say, was on a Sunday morning about 7:45, and I was in the wardroom eating breakfast, and I heard this explosion. Well, of course, I rushed out of the wardroom right out on deck. I mean, our deck ran right alongside the wardroom, and I thought perhaps that the fire in the gasoline storage that they had on Ford Island on Saturday had erupted again. Well, golly, when I got on deck, well, here come a plane by and had a big round red ball on the side. And then, of course, all these explosions around. Of course, we went to general quarters right away. And, of course, all we had on board was a 3-inch 50 forward and one aft, and then had a couple of 20 millimeters. And of course, like I say, they were attacking Ford Island as well as Battleship Row. And the first group that came in were torpedo bombers. And they, of course, launched their torpedoes at the ships that were tied up at Pearl Harbor Navy Yard, as well as Battleship Row, which is tied up with quays, what we call quays, in Ford Island there. And they approached from seaward, and they approached from over the submarine base, and then, of course, over Pearl Harbor itself, Honolulu. And then, of course, following the torpedo planes, they had the dive bombers, and then the fighters came in for strafing. So they pretty much peppered the place. And, of course, fortunately, the Enterprise wasn't able to make the harbor because she was running behind schedule and she had to stay out. And but if she'd have been at the dock, she'd have gotten it, because we were tied up at the dock where she was supposed to, and we warped back on the side of the dock so she could come in. And during this bombardment and so forth, why, these big armor-piercing shells dropped right in the area. I mean, right in a string. There wasn't just a miss. They was right in a row, and the old water spouts really, well, it went up higher in our masts on our tender.
But they never actually took aim at your ship specifically, do you
Well,
think?
we only, well, there was one of the fighters that went across it. I think he was just picking up his strafing run ahead of time. Mm-hmm. And, of course, fortunately, we did get one aircraft. And it was a torpedo bomber. And, of course, they give us an E on that with a little Japanese ball on it.
Now, what was, after this happened, how long did it take, and then what was your personal reaction to what happened? Took, what, 45 minutes, an hour, and 10 minutes or something?
Well, I'd say the overall, they came over in two waves.
Right.
And the first wave ended about, I'd say maybe around 8:15, someplace along in there. And then the second wave came over. Now, they were the high-altitude bombers. They were the ones that was dropping destruction to cripple everything. And the funny thing of it to me was the fact that they never hardly hurt the submarine base, and, of course, they hit the dry dock on the Navy Yard side, thinking that the Pennsylvania, which was the flagship, was in there, but it wasn't. Uh-huh. It was another ship, and of course that's what they always go for, is the flagship, because that's where all the operations are. And of course there was chaos, because I mean the men were down at breakfast where they were eating, and of course, in those days when you went to sea, you could bring your ammunition up on deck. And some ships had what we call ready storage ammunition boxes on topside. A lot of them didn't, like your big 8 and 12-inch guns. Well, they couldn't. And when you come back in port, well, you always had to put your ammunition below. Well, the time that you get your ammunition up out of the hold, your station's manned and the gun's firing in operation, it'd take 5-10 minutes according to your position and what you have to do and get to general quarters. Well, of course, too, we must realize that these ships has already been hit while the men are eating.
Yeah, but not your ship, isn't though?
No.
Yeah.
And they're on fire and everything else. And, of course, another bad feature is the fact when you come in like that and weekend, while you stretch awnings, the awnings caught fire, and, of course, that helped on the fire line too, and ships even blowing up. I mean, we got to face it. They blew up. Oil was spread all over, and men were blowing out into the water, and they couldn't swim. The oil was on fire. I mean, it's just miraculous that as many people got out as they did.
Now, could you see this from your
ship?
Yes, yeah. You could see other ships burning.
Oh, yeah. I was tied right up next to the Battleship Row at this dock here at Ford Island. Yeah. And right along your north side of your Ford Island, you got these quays and all these battleships and everything else, the oil and everything like that. and all maybe 500 or 600 yards across from us was the Navy yard.
Now, what was your immediate reaction after this starts? What happens to your thinking process?
Well, first thing we do is go to general quarters, and then man our gun stations, open fire, and set your damage control and everything like that, and secure all unnecessary equipment and fuel lines and so forth like that, and get your engines. Of course, we had what we call dock duty. We had steam up to our engines and everything, so all we had to do was just turn them on. But you kept everything in readiness and cut off everything that you didn't need.
And that's what the ship did.
Yeah. And then, of course, as I say, we opened fire and so forth like that. But so many of the ships weren't that fortunate.
Yeah.
And they weren't looking for the small ships. They were after the battleships, the cruisers, the carriers, everything else. See, from things that have been found or captured, from other ships, all these planes and everything had pictures of the harbor and so forth. And as I understand, even over in Japan, they build a regular Pearl Harbor and put dummy ships out, and they practice.
Okay, good. But specifically, I want to know what happened on your ship. What did the CO or the exec, did they get on the horn, or did you come up to power and start sailing away? Or
No. What we did was, as I stated before, made the ship ready for sea, just the same as if we were getting underway. And then when these, as I spoke a while ago, these armor-piercing shells striking right off of us, it broke our dock lines. We was hanging by one dock line, so we had to get underway, and we maneuvered out. And then, in the meantime, the Nevada had gotten underway and went down, and she ran aground down over the hospital point. Well, we went on around the harbor and stopped and fought one fire and picked up some men that were in the water and came on around, and then we went over to the Nevada and helped put out her fires and so forth. And when that was finished, then we went around and did rescue work. But the amazing thing was that they caught 2 midget submarines in Pearl. And they were laid up over there in Pearl Harbor. They found this out through the papers and so forth. They had in this one sub. Incidentally, this one sub that they ran aground over there in the submarine base was the one that they showed around the country for the bond drive during the war. But getting back to it, these submarines laid 2 down there, submerged. They were the
Part 4.
As I was stating, that they were submerged down there at Pearl City, and this was inside. And they found out how they got inside was when the ships would come in, the turbulence set up by their screws would knock out any electronic contacts. And of course, there at Pearl Harbor, they always had a net stretched across, and of course the ship would have to send a signal and so forth so that they'd know that it was legal for it to come through, and they would open the net. Well, these little submarines would follow this wake or the turbulence set up by the ship's screw or propeller, which a lot of people go by, and they would follow it in, and that's the way these 2 got in there, and they laid over there at Pearl City and submerged. Then at night they would come up and send out their communications, or when they first got in there, they made the trip around the island, and each night they would put down what ship was in or what one had left, and the type of ship. And that was the way they found out how the ships were maneuvering, operating, and so forth. And, of course, during this attack, of course, they got underway. Well, one of them was depth charge by one of the search destroyers that was in the harbor, and the other one was damaged, so he ran aground there on subbase.
Okay. I think we've determined that your ship gets underway and he picks up survivors. The attack is over. You haven't been hit. And you've gone around the base and you've done what you can. Okay. Now, night is falling, and what happens to you and the ship? And tell me what happens. Just personally, what happens on the ship?
Well, of course, we go back to our old berth,
Right.
tie up, and then we set the search and watch.
What is that?
Well, that's your emergency. In other words, we set up lookouts, secure all lights, everything. And we said just as if we were at sea in combat readiness. That's just what it boils down to. Mm-hmm. And of course, unfortunately, some of the planes was coming in from the carriers, you see, and making a landing there at Ford Island, and our guns opened up on them, and we lost several aircraft. But, like I say, under those conditions, under the pressure, and so forth like that, you shoot at anything. Yeah. You don't know who it is. You don't know whether they were going to send in a night attack. We didn't know whether they knew how bad off we were or anything else. Yeah. I mean, it's just one of those things. You just don't take chances that you were that fellow.
Yeah. What was your duty then that night when you're under this wartime condition finally?
Well, on that there, I was responsible for the damage control and gunnery and everything like that. Yeah. See, on those small ships, you had several jobs. Right. And you had practically all the jobs except being the engineer.
Yeah. Now, were there rumors flying around on the ship that night as to more attacks and
well, no,
land attacks?
Now, I'm just speaking for our ship. Right. Of course, I'd been with these fellows a long time, and I did understand their personalities and their capabilities, and I trusted them. They trusted me, but surprisingly, they were very quiet. You could see that there was something that they didn't understand. They wanted to know, but they just couldn't quite reach it. And you didn't dare start talking, because then you get all kinds of tales going and everything else. And like I say, through experience, you see, on these small ships at that time, not because that I was on board or anything like that, but they were a different type of an individual. They depended on each other and worked together, and they helped each other. And if one had problems, he would help, and so forth like that. And when you're with a crew like that for 2 or 3 years, you don't forget those things. Yeah. And you can tell just by his actions or his tightening up what his feelings are.
Were you concerned that night of December 7th, were you concerned that your family might think that you were injured or killed? And then further, were you concerned that the Japanese were possibly attacking the United States?
Well, now, there you got 2 or 3 questions there in one. Well, my communications home, of course, as I say, I only had my mother and the 2 brothers, but I communicated with my mother constantly. But I didn't want to try to get a message through, because it was just impossible. And I'm quite sure that my mother felt at the time that as soon as I could, I would tell her yay or nay. And then for the other, I don't know, it's just one of those things that comes once in a lifetime, that you receive and go through this experience, that a lot of things you know you don't want to talk about. Yeah. You don't want to say about this individual, that individual, and maybe other people then would see or hear this, where they start a rumor of this or rumor of that. And of course, we felt that by daylight, if there was not another attack, that they were gone. And fortunately, as a couple of days later, after all of this shake-up and the findings and the looking around and see what happened and things like that, and the repair and recovery work started, why then we were informed that the planes did go back to sea. Of course, a lot of them were lost because they were damaged or didn't have fuel sufficiency to get back to their carrier or ship, whatever they were attached on, and departed. But my way of thinking, I think that our people really never realized just how close we come to being invaded. I've always felt, and no one can change my mind, is that if those carriers and the support supply groups that they had with them on this operation, if they had known how seriously we had been hurt, they would have landed, and we couldn't have done a thing about it.
Yeah.
And anybody that controls Pearl Harbor, that's the key to the South, and whoever holds that has got a bridge in there that will be difficult to surrender.
What happened afterwards? I mean, next day, next week?
Well, the next day, it was surprising. The people on the ship, you know, they all got working together. They all pooled their boats and everything like that. And, of course, they had the harbor master there, and, of course, the commander-in-chief there. And they started the operation of cleanup and assisting here and pumping out ships, you know, that their hulls were punctured and filled in with water. They put a temporary patch over it and pump the water out and get it floating and take it to the Navy Yard. And out of all of those ships, 13 of them were recovered, which was amazing by this admiral. And, of course, like I say, unfortunately, we lost the Arizona with nearly 2,000 men in. And, of course, it's like I say, it's one of those things, and it can occur any time, any place. But it's just miraculous how we could recover all those battleships and repair ships and stuff like that. In a short time, within 18 months, they were all back in the battle line. It's just amazing. I mean, people don't realize those things, you see.
Did the ship go back to duty, or did it stay at Pearl Harbor?
Well, no, we were ordered out on for the Amchitka, Alaska invasion. And, of course, they ordered us out, and we went to Bremerton, Washington, and had a yard upkeep there to prepare us for Alaskan duty.
Did you have any idea at that time that you were going to Alaska?
Oh, no. We didn't know it until we got our orders, of course. But we spent, I guess, maybe a month there, because in those days they didn't fool around. Everybody did their 8 hours work or 12 hours. I mean, there was no coffee breaks or anything like that. This was war, and a man-of-war ship had to be ready no matter how many hours they had to plug at it. But, yeah, we left there and went in up to Alaska and then started on the invasion down towards Amchitka. And
what happened there?
well, they started the maneuvering, going out and taking the bases as they went out. And see, Amchitka was a stronghold for the Japanese. They had an air group there as well as men ashore. And, of course, that was another thing that when they made the invasion of Amchitka, why, they pulled a lot of the military people out of California, you know, and they weren't trained for warfare in the snow and so forth. I mean, it's snow up there. I mean, willy walls and everything else. And the weather, it can be sunshiny and nice now, and an hour later, boy, you could have snow clear up to your ears. But that was the first time I understand that we really had troops that fought in snow, you know, and of course the Japs had, well, it was one of their main bases, and they were housed in, had the proper gear and the gun embankments and everything, and it was quite a loss on both sides as far as that goes, but I have to give them the odds on that.
What did your ship, what duties did it perform?
Well, we were a seaplane tender.
Still?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
And after the Amchitka, Alaska, then what?
Well, they came over on the East Coast and made a run over, I don't know what they call a Merrimack's Run, but I don't know. I got a different name for it. But made that run and on the Antares and came back from there. And
What was the Antares? Still the seaplane tender?
no, this was regular cargo. See, I caught another ship later on.
Yeah. How many times did you make that Mermask?
One.
Just one time.
Mhm.
Was there anything
No,
outstanding or memorable on
no, just lucky. That's all. I mean, close shipping and stuff like that. I mean, just lucky. I mean that.
You went on a convoy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the later ones that really got peppered when they knew the operation was going.
When did you get commissioned then?
Oh gosh, I've been commissioned a long time.
Yeah.
Really, I had. That was let's see, that was long about.
Was it after Pearl Harbor?
No, it was before Pearl Harbor. I think it was long about April of 40, I think.
In other words, you were commissioned in April of 40?
Mhm.
Yeah. Was this unusual for a man to go from enlisted man to commissioned officer back in those?
Yeah, really. See, the thing of it was, the enlisted man, really, when I was in, the highest he was expected to attain was a chief warrant officer.
Yeah.
And, of course, he was really what you might say the go-between the enlisted man and the regular naval officer out of the academy and so forth. In other words, he was the go-between or the bumper man. And, of course, they had 4 stages in it, warrant 1, 2, 3, 4. And you had to spend so many years as a warrant officer before you could be selected for a chief warrant officer. And, of course, when I took my exam for warrant, see, I took it for warrant boats and aviation. I was with aviation. And I was one of the youngest ones at that time, and I was number 2 in that year's selection for aviation boatswain. And of course, then shortly after the war, well, they made an insect out of me, and then went on up the grade. Of course, during this time, I mean, it's your experience and your training and so forth, and then, of course, the various school trainings I got with the Navy and things like that. And of course, I'm very fortunate. I mean, sometimes you hit it lucky, sometimes you don't, but I feel I've been very lucky, and where I've sites and places I've been, and the training that I've received from the service, it's helped me a lot of times. And but I think a career for a man in the service is very difficult to beat. I mean, he's got to like it. I mean, you can't just go in and fight it, because if you do, you might just as well go out the back door. You've got to like that type of life, and of course, you've got to put up with being away from your family. My children and everything were long and 7, 8 years old before I really had the opportunity really to be a dad to them. It was pretty difficult to work it that way.
Okay, we've Pearl Harbor, Amchitka, and Murmansk, and that basically was the war career, right?
Yeah.
And then we go to what positions?
Well, really, I went back down into the South Pacific when they went on the invasion of the Philippines and Leyte, and the ship that I was carrying, the USS Donner, we carried some of the raiders in there in Leyte, and operated with seaplanes down there. And then after the Philippine invasion, about a month after that, then I was transferred out of the South back for shore. See, I hadn't been ashore, anything. And I guess the skipper probably figured that I need a rest to get the heck out, get out from under his feet.
On the invasion of Leyte, anything unusual come up? Like, did they use kamikazes on you?
Yeah, that was, of course they made the initial landing. They sent these individuals in, the Quark guys. They went in, the raiders, they were qualified for undersea and setting mines, all this. And they went in and worked out the routes, for the ships to go through. See, they had these places all mined, these shorelines and so forth, and a lot of cables too. And of course, they came in and got that out. And then on dawn, why, the old battleships, laden Battleship Rowan, just dropped them in there. And then, of course, the LSDs or LSTs went in, landed the troops and so forth like that. And surprisingly, I don't know whether you recall, but this Bong, our ace, our first ace, I saw him get shot down over Leyte.
You did?
And the amazing thing was that we were with the seaplanes around there, and we were keeping aerial search and so forth. And the amazing thing, the planes that was in his group circled him all the way down while he was in parachute. Mm-hmm. And that was one thing that always reminded me of Leyte.
Mm-hmm. Now, on the invasion of Leyte, you were still on a
seaplane tender.
Still on a seaplane?
Yeah.
Still
yeah.
At the,
oh yeah.
Still in the aviation?
Yeah, we were the only one. Like I say, that's the way they transferred people around. It was amazing. I mean, I don't know how the hell half of them got their stations. Really,
yeah.
I really don't. But they'd always managed to get there, yeah. And there was always somebody you go to a station, for further reporting to your duty. There's always some character there that would get you transferred temporarily. Yeah. There was an awful lot of that going.
How long did you lay off the shore of Leyte during the invasion?
Well, we were 3 days.
And then you pull back to...
Yeah, then we'd form up, and the fleet would maneuver out of there because, see, a lot of the Japanese fleet was operating then too.
Did you see any kamikazes at Leyte?
Yeah, now that was where the Bettys came in, was there in Leyte. Uh-huh. Betty was the new torpedo and bombing plane they had.
Yeah.
And of course, they were getting down to the bottom of the ground, really. I mean, and they would just come in and just skim the water. Mm-hmm.
Did they take after your ship or not? Did you?
No, they were after the troop transports, the big stuff. I mean,
but the Japanese suicide plane, didn't bother your ship either.
No, they were after the others. Oh well, of course, one of them got shot down. A couple of them landed close, but they weren't directly using us as a target.
Well, and then after Leyte, you pull back and you're back to the United States for furlough.
I got reassigned, and I came back to Jacksonville waiting for further orders, and of course it ended off. And then I helped close the airship base down there below Jacksonville. And then from there I came up to Comservlant and served there and ran the Mediterranean and so forth to Europe. And then went into the reserve program. They started putting regular Navy people into the reserve program. Mm-hmm. And of course that's where I got affiliated with it. From there, went through training there, and then from there I went up to Great Lakes and was the administrative officer for Com-9's reserve bases and ships operating there, and also their summer orders, things like that. And then from there, I was ordered down to Newport News in the atomic program, and I spent about 2 years there, and fortunately got to see the first atomic carrier, the Enterprise, launched there, and of course several of the submarines, and then retired.
Was this a decision of yours to retire, or could you have stayed on?
I couldn't have stayed on, George, for the simple reason is I came under the old warrant bill, and it states that at the end of 30 years, no matter grade, rank, what you have to retire. Fortunately, they had curtailed all the other warrant laws, and so many of them got torpedoed, as we said, around 24 to 26 years. But the old warrant law that I came under, this aviation law and so forth, allowed you 30 years. Of course, fortunately, I got about 31 years because my relief was coming from atomic school to relieve me there in the shipbuilder's office there in Newport. And of course, as I say, the security and all this kind of stuff that I was involved with, I couldn't turn it over to a temporary relief. It has to be from the guy from the school. So I had a pretty rounded out thing. Oh, of course, like I say, I get talking while you think of other things, but I enjoyed it, and of course I had my ups and downs, and had things that I didn't like but I had to do, or vice versa. It's not a bed of roses.
Yeah.
I mean, but an individual just has to like it, and he has to be able to take discipline.
Yeah.
Of course, as the situation is, I've been retired 14 years. On April the 1st, 61, I retired. But so many things have changed now that my concept of the Navy and as of today would just be 180 degrees out. I mean, I just probably wouldn't appeal to me, but I think eventually when it gets shook down and they find out what type of warfare they're going to do, I think it'll shape up. I think, I think more individuals are going to the armed services.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know. I think they're gradually getting a better caliber as they go along, and so many lads aren't able to go to college and follow a career that they want. But in the armed services, there's so many diversified fields that they can go into that Uncle Sam pays for.
How many years at sea did you stay?
I spent 24 years.
Let's see, out of 31.
Out of 31, yes.
Did you ever think that you would wind up 31 years in the Navy starting out at the end?
No. Well, when I first went in, like I say, 4 years, give it a try. Well, of course, at the end of 4 years, things were pretty tough on the outside. And of course, I knew that I had lost my opportunity to go to college, so I just says, well, I'll give it another trip, 6 more years. So fortunately, I made the right decision, and of course, I've sacrificed a lot. I mean, a lot of my life, in other words, a third of my life or a little more was given to Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
That's a third that I don't feel that I've lost through education of where I have been and so forth like that. But it's a third of my life that's worked away. Of course, you often wonder about it, but I don't feel that I've lost anything. I feel that I've gained by it, and I'm very happy about it. And I know it's something that no one can take it away from me, and that it's mine, and it'll always be mine. It's just like they say, you get a sheepskin for going through college, but you don't get one for hard knocks.
Right.
And that's the way I feel that my life has been, is a college of hard knocks. But I got no sheepskin.
Has retirement been happy, Bill?
Well, I honestly don't. I like the Navy. I like to be around it. I miss the water, and I miss really. I miss the association. And gee, I practically grew up in it, and I miss the Navy. I really do. I miss people talking with them. You know, around here, all we have is Army or Air, you see, and Marines. Very few Navy men. I think outside of the captain over at LaFountain, I think I'm the only fully retired naval officer outside of him.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, I haven't seen him in over a year. And but of course he's teaching out of state. But I mean, you miss those things. I do. I just can't get settled down to it. I mean, there's no use trying to kid anybody.
Even after 14 years, you...
No, I still yearn, or whatever you want to call it, for my Navy contacts and so forth. Geez, I have never... it just thrilled me to death when I went to Boston when we commissioned the USS Wabash. Geez, I got to walk on a Navy ship again, float on the water. Mm-hmm. It was really something for me. I mean, it just brought back my old days and so forth. I was in my prime or in my glory there. Mm-hmm. But gee, you come back to the mill here and you see none of that. Of course, you see a small boat go by, but that stuff grows on you. You just don't shed it overnight, and I never will as far as that goes, because like I said before, if I had the opportunity, I would do it over again. Mm-hmm. Of course, now I hit the 65 mark, and now I'm not eligible for recall or anything. If they do it, have an all-out war, I'd probably be a swivel chair bandit.
Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't set with me at all. I mean, I just like to be there, see? But, of course, it's like to say, well, sure, you can talk about when you know it's not going to happen to you and so forth. But I don't feel that way. It's still inside of me, and like these TV shows where they have one of these war pictures on, I wouldn't care who was talking on the TV. I go to that program. I mean, I don't know. It's hard to explain it, but it's one of those things.
I think this has been a real interesting afternoon, Bill, and I want to thank you.
Well, I've enjoyed, George. You know, if you sit and think a lot of times, well, I could probably add more, but...
we can add it on the transcript anytime.
So...
Yeah. Good. This interview has been by George Dingledike.